We are going to talk about East and West. Is it complementary or contradictory? I guess in the modern world, the East and West, it's a rather old definition, because a couple of years ago, Chairman Xi at the Davos meeting was one of the protector of the liberal global economic order. On the contrary, 45 President of the United States, on the third day after inauguration, he canceled Trans-Pacific Partnership. So old definitions are mixed today. And we have, I guess, very representative panelists today. So from the left from me is Monsieur Pierre Lelouch. He is very much experienced gentleman. He have unbelievable experience working in the National Assembly of France. He served 5 terms as the member of the French Parliament. Also, he have an excellent experience in the executive branch of the French government. He worked in a couple positions as a minister in France, Minister of Foreign Trade, and I forget Minister of what else, and Minister of Europe. And one of his achievements is that some 30 years ago he wrote a book where he predicts some current disorder in the global architecture. Then we have Dr. Bei Lin-Lei, who is a researcher from the Eurasian Institute of the Chinese Academy of International Policy. We have also Mr. Trupnikov, who is currently the board member of IMMO, and he also have very long experience in the executive part of our government. He served as director of Foreign Intelligence Service. He is 4-star general. He also served as the first deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. He served as an ambassador in India. And he is also a scholar who published a lot of regarding mainly his expertise in the Southeast Asia. And we have also director of IMMO, correspondent member of the Russian Academy of Science, Professor Fyodor Voitolovsky. He have also different type of expertise. He's arms controller. He covers Russian-American relations. He covers the developments in Northeast Asia. So also very, very experienced member of our panel today. And also we have Professor Shiva Alizadeh from Tehran University. She was introduced yesterday. She speaks a lot of languages, including Russian, and welcome all the panelists. My question is that the speed of the changes of the global architecture is unbelievable. In the modern history, we have such a fast changes only after the post-war periods. Today, everything is in moving. What is the anchors in such a chaos, I should say? The anchors, I believe, is understanding of the reality. It's completely new reality, and after our understanding of those new reality, I guess we have to have some legal confirmation of this new reality. This is experience from the past, from the post-war periods. Of course, some could say that we are also in the post-war period, post-Cold War period. But this is the questions to all panelists. So let me start and give a floor to Monsieur Pierre Lelouch. Pierre, please.
So as you said yourself, from 1945 to 1990, for 45 years, the lives at the time of 4 or 5 billion people, was entirely dominated by the confrontation between two blocs, East and West, each organized around one leading superpower. Each superpower had a universal ideology, and each superpower had enough killing power to destroy any faraway place on the planet. The mixture of ideological truce and nuclear weapons was yesterday's world. That world was supposed to be ended 30 years ago with the fall of the Berlin Wall, which we celebrated a few days ago. And immense changes have taken place since then. Of course, capitalism, including in China, has become the norm of the day to run a modern economy. The reunification of Europe has taken place. The Soviet Union is gone. The rise of China as the #1 power, if not immediately today, but tomorrow morning, is another great revolution. Another enormous revolution is demographic change. We have gained some 2 billion people, now more than 7 billion people, creating huge migration problem, confronting certain parts of the world, particularly Europe. The impact of globalization has been enormous, lifting hundreds of million people out of poverty, but also creating huge problems for the middle classes in the West, as Alexander showed us yesterday on his slides, creating also a massive crisis of the social contract and therefore of democracy in the former great power of the West. And we have seen also what I called in my latest book, the intensification of endless wars in the Muslim world, with the rise of mass terrorism inside the Muslim countries, but also affecting democratic countries, including my own. We had something like 400 people killed in Paris and France in the last few years, and several hundred people wounded. And yet, as if to justify Lampedusa formula, which is in order to change, nothing has to change, Professor Dinkin and Armen are asking us today to reflect on East and West contradiction and complementarity. But my first remark is to beg to differ with both of you. I must say I have a hard time understanding today's world and tomorrow's world if I put East-West glasses. To begin with, what is the East? What is the East today? Is it Russia? Or is it Russia and Armenia together? Or is it Russia with China? And assuming, are we sure that Russia and China have the same national, strategic, economic interest? And assuming they did, are we sure they are the enemies of the West? And what is the West? And what is indeed the West when the United States, which is supposed to be the leader of the West, run its foreign policy by tweet without informing anybody of what it's going to do? For example, withdrawing from Syria, where we, the French, have forces. We happen to have soldiers there too. And so we are told, all of a sudden, nobody knows, including the French president, we are leaving, they are leaving. But then we also told that they are staying. But they are staying for what? To protect the oil in Syria, as if the oil is part of American possession. What is the West when the United States Justice Department has imposed something like 26 billion euro in sanctions of various kind on Western European companies in the last few years, on the various pieces of legislation which I've studied in detail, again, without the consent and approval of European government. The latest being the decision on Iran, on the JCPOA, which not only stops US companies from dealing with Iran, but also stops everybody's companies, including, of course, European companies, for the simple use of the dollar. And what is the West when the US is leaving the Paris Agreement, when it is canceling trade negotiation, when it is imposing trade sanction unilaterally, again, on a number of countries, not just Iran, but also France and others. And what is the West, if you look at NATO, which has no strategic concept whatsoever on just about any issue, be it terrorism, the Middle East, Russia. Trump repeatedly calls NATO a ripoff of the American taxpayer by the European. And really aptly and justly, President Macron recently said that it was brain dead, and it is brain dead. What is an alliance when a country, a member country like Turkey, not only buys Russian air defense system, but invades a neighbor without telling anybody again, except having a conversation with President Trump? One spectacular example of this lack of unity, in fact, this massive split, came just about a week ago between the 12th and the 18th of November. On the 12th of November, the European Court of Justice decided to impose special tags on food product coming from the Palestinian territories. It should say that this orange is a Palestinian orange and not an Israeli orange. 6 days later, President Trump declared that the Israeli colonies in the occupied Palestine are absolutely legal. So where exactly is the West? And is it the EU, which spent most of this time talking about Brexit and very little time talking about what it should do, for example, with Ukraine, Russia, or China, let alone on terrorism? Where is the strategic concept? In short, ladies and gentlemen, what remains of the West when its central values, the so-called liberal order, has been essentially torn down by the United States, what remains is highly debatable. The challenges in front of us are just enormous, but we are seeing, in fact, a completely different story. I would not define the world in East-West relation, but I would define it more between those who are revisionist countries and those, and therefore are unilateralist in the ways they want to change the system, and those who are still status quo power. So the big division, seems to me, is between the conservatives, those who want to try to keep the system as it is, and these are the Europeans, the Japanese, the South Koreans, but just about every other power on the globe today tries to change the rules of the game to its advantage, beginning with China, Russia, the US, India in part, Iran certainly, Turkey certainly. What we are seeing with people invading their neighbors is what I would call the internationalization of the Monroe Doctrine. I decide that this is my region, therefore I can move my forces, and too bad if people don't like it. Now, the problem with that is that we are facing a whole different world today, and if I were to look at the world from the basis of this division between conservative and revisionist countries or powers, the issues are the same for everyone. And there are at least a half-dozen issues. Let me list them quickly. The first central issue of the 21st century, for me, is demography. because we are going to go to 10 billion people by 2040, 2050, which is tomorrow morning, really. And 10 billion people means more massive immigration towards a number of countries within Africa, towards Europe. It's going to be a major game changer. It is already becoming a game changer because it will affect internal social contract in all of our countries. The second big change we are seeing, of course, it was mentioned yesterday, I think it was Tom, it's technology and the mix of intelligence, artificial intelligence plus biotechnology. This is going to change humanity. It's going to change the next generation. It's changing you. It's going to change your children even more. It's going to change absolutely everything in the way we approach life in society. And clearly on this area, Europe and Russia are on the losing side. It's a big battle of the 21st century. Is going to be bipolar in this particular area. It's going to be US versus China. Globalization is a third big challenge. I mentioned the big transformation is bringing into our societies in the West. We were the spoiled children of the industrial age. Now we are on the losing side. And in each of our countries, social contract is threatened, and what you see is a rise of extreme political parties, what we call populist. But if you look at the political life inside each European country, including Brexit, of course, you will see the same things. Fourth thing, the fourth major challenge will be the continuation of nationalist and religious challenges. And here the question of Islam will continue to be very salient throughout the 21st century, because the heart of the matter is whether or not the Islamic world can adjust to globalization and economic and social changes, particularly the place of women in Muslim society. Finally, there is the question of climate change, which again is a massive question for all of us, whether we are conservative, revisionist, and so on. And lastly, there is a question of the arms race. We are seeing the end of arms control, unfortunately, and the birth of a new arms race with new technologies, including artificial intelligence, which are going to change completely the way we think about deterrence and the use of weapons. So these are the challenges ahead of us, and this is how, Alexander, I would like to frame the issue this afternoon. Is there going to be unretrievable contradiction among our nations to face these issues, or are we going to be able to converge on some of these to at least to avoid massive conflicts, because each of them carry a risk of outright conflict. Let's take demography. On demography, we really have to, I'm talking to the young people here. I know in Armenia, you have the reverse problem. You don't have enough people, and people are leaving. In Africa, they are leaving too because there are too many, and there's no hope. Let me just give you one example. Africa was a few hundred million people at the beginning of the 20th century. It's going to be 2.5 billion people in 2050. And if you take the Sahel alone, the 5 countries of the Sahel band, which are the 5 poorest countries in the world, Mauritania, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, their population will be 220 million by 2050. Now, if you go to Niger, for example, or Mali, you only see sand. There is no job, nothing, a few goats. Each woman has 7 children. So what do you think you do when you are 16 or 17 and there's no hope? Either you do contraband of human people, migrants, or you join Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, or you move to Europe. So the migration potential just from the Sahel is enormous. 220 million people. Remember, the size of the EU, including Russia, is 500 million people. That's for demography. If you look at technology, because I could go on for a long time on this, but I know we are short of time. We need a system of collective control of this mega power company. Contrary to, I mean, what we are witnessing, and Tom mentioned it yesterday, this is a systemic change. It's like the invention of the printing in the Renaissance, okay? Except that the invention of printing permitted the spread of knowledge and criticism and politics. The spread of Facebook plus artificial intelligence is producing just the reverse. The spread of stupidity without control by anybody. What we need to build is a transnational control system, not just on the finances of these mammoth companies, which are much richer than many of the states, but also on what they're doing. Third, the same goes for trade. We have to revive the trade organization and not let them die. Revive the WTO and revive regional trade agreements. Fourth, on Islam and terrorism, we need to do a number of things. Certainly talk differently to the Muslim world, talk especially in Africa. And we Europeans need to talk more to the Russians, because the bottom line is Russia and Europe actually face the same problem. And we must stop, we Europeans, to be spectators of the situation in the Middle East, which is completely out of control. The US has said that they are leaving, so who is in control? And what is the future? Fifth, on climate change, we need to, of course, work on the Paris Agreement and not let it die. And the role of China in this is very, very important, along with other countries. And finally, on arms control, we need to try and salvage, and there the role of China again is very important, because it is inescapable that if we are going to have disarmament negotiation in the 21st century, it will have to include China. So you see, it's a tall order. Fixing demography, Islam, trade, technology, climate, the arms race, it's very simple. Either we continue with short-term national policies and forget about the neighbors, and I try to gain immediate short-term gains, or we try to rebuild a rule-based order in which we can preserve peace. But if we don't do that, the road is open to very serious conflict in the years ahead. So very, very pessimistic at the moment. It's part of the answer is in the ability to educate people and to put pressure on governments. And it's therefore what you are doing in this university, what you are doing at MMO, what we are doing in each of our countries, to educate our leadership, to put pressure on the system in order to think internationally and not just short-term benefits, is absolutely crucial for the future world peace. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Pierre. Share your concern, and the only my slight disagreement with your definition. You define two camps as conservatives and revisionists. Who is revisionists? Because we, okay. That fits completely to the old strategic documents which was published in District of Columbia. But who?
US also.
No, but who is the source of revisionism? On my last slide yesterday, I show how fast the global order, including arms control, including WTO, challenged by 45 President of United States. So I guess Russia and maybe China, they're, let's say, conservatives, and revisionists is United States, first of all.
I didn't challenge that.
Okay.
I said returning to great... In a nutshell, what I'm saying is that we are returning to classic big power politics of the 19th century. Emerging powers and former superpowers, like Russia or the US, are trying to set the new system according to their national interest. And they can be very brutal about it. We've seen, and I'm not even discussing the merits of Ukraine. I'm just saying, okay, we had an agreement not to change border by force. Border was changed by force. Okay, but this reminds me of the Monroe Doctrine. This is what I say, you know, we are living now the internationalization of the Monroe Doctrine. What the Chinese are doing in the South China Sea. They are building bases, they are treating this place as a Chinese lake. When a French ship goes through the Chinese waters, it says, no, this is Chinese waters. I mean, the South China Sea now is a property of the People's Republic of China. This is what I consider big power politics, okay? As if we are going to interdict a Chinese ship in the Channel or in the Mediterranean. I mean, this is 19th century politics, gunboat diplomacy. And I'm worried that this stuff can derail because the issues in front of us, each of them ask for cooperation. If we're not able to cooperate on demography, on how we aid these countries, not building mosques, for example. Some Gulf countries, if you go to these miserable villages in Niger or Mali, what do you see? The only building that stands is a mosque. Everybody else is starving. And the money that we are putting, the EU, France, and so on, is not going to the people. So we have to completely reconstruct the aid system if we want to avoid the continuation of the flux of people in Europe, which is, by the way, leading Marine Le Pen to power in France at some point, or Salvini in Italy. So these are the immediate issues. So either we are able to put these policies in practice, or we risk internal and external upheaval. And right now, because even you, Alexander, you said, well, I'm not revisionist. Of course you are. I mean, maybe less than the US, but you are. The Chinese are revisionists. The Chinese were, you know, we were sitting on them for 150 years, and now they say, we're back. And President Xi Jinping said, China is back. And Chinese nationalism is mentioned 23 times in his latest speech to the Chinese Popular Assembly. Right? This is a fact of life. Now, having understood all this and respect anybody's national interest, I hope these guys get together and fix it before it's too late. Voilà.
Okay, as I promised, the topic of the current panel would be very wide, and look, 85% I agree with my friend Pierre, but let me pose another question. When does rule-based order starts? After Iraq or during Libya? I guess maybe Russia as well as China violated something. But we violated the monopoly of the West to violate international order. This is my conclusion. Saying this, I'm giving the floor to Tom Graham, who I guess would clarify our discussion with Pierre. Tom, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. Let me start by saying that your difficult active policy, in part because actually it's everything that you said. I'm even beyond 85%. I think is a wonderful presentation of the challenges that we face. I thought what I could do to start, since my Russian colleagues, my French colleague, my Chinese colleagues have all talked about the United States, that I perhaps ought to start by talking about something about my own country, the United States. And the first point I would make is that, I mean, it is clear that the United States is going through a tremendous domestic upheaval at this point. much of what Alexander presented yesterday about the middle class crisis generalized throughout the West, I think throughout the world, is probably greatest in the United States right now. We do have a problem with inequality. We've had the problems that emerged from the success of the globalization that we pursued, I think, quite successfully from, I would think, the middle of the 1980s going forward. And you see that played out in the domestic politics, extreme polarization in the United States, amplified by the internet. People can find their own news sources now, so they don't have a common sense of what is actually going on in the United States. We don't have a common sense of, or a common set of facts from which we are debating political issues. You see that most graphically in the present discussion of the possible impeachment of the President of the United States, where it's clear that the Democrats on the one hand, the Republicans who support Trump on the other, live in two entirely different worlds. Now, the one thing that I would stress here is that we tend to idealize the past in the United States. We've gone through something similar to this in my lifetime 50 years ago, in the 1960s. There was polarization in the United States in the 1960s that largely grew out of a civil rights movement, but even more so out of our engagement in Vietnam, which really split people in the country, split generations. The younger generation now was worried about climate change. The younger generation, when I was growing up, was worried about the United States being engaged in colonial type wars that they were not particularly eager to fight, no matter what the political masters said at that point. So there's a great deal of polarization in the country at that point. In 1968, two of the major political figures, one in civil rights, one in politics, were assassinated. Over 100 cities in the United States experienced racial riots, including Washington, D.C. itself for several days, where we brought military force, the National Guard, in to maintain order. It happened in a city that was not very far from where I grew up. When we got to the 1970s, we actually had a process that led to the resignation of the president. It would have led to the impeachment and his removal if he hadn't resigned. So there's a deep sense of, I think, discontent and pessimism about the United States. But we recovered from that. It took us about a decade, and the United States came back, found a new consensus, and found a consensus about the role that we wanted to play in global affairs. So this is a way of saying it's a difficult time in the United States, but I don't think we ought to extrapolate from now to a sense that this is the way it's always going to be. The United States has a remarkable capacity to reinvent itself, as it has throughout history, to rebuild consensus, and it still has a wealth of sources that can produce a very prosperous society and a country that can provide a different or some type of leadership along with others on the global stage. Now, I think the one thing that is different now from what was different, what I experienced in my youth, is the global stage. Because there's no sense in the 1960s or the 1970s that the United States was going to leave, that we were going to upset the global order in a significant way, that we've become a revolutionary power. That has changed, and changed most dramatically under the current president. Now, the point I would make here is that it is also, I think, improper to extrapolate from this current president to what the United States is going to be doing on the international stage in the future. I would have put it in a different way. We are engaged in a debate in the United States now about its role in the world, its goals in the world, and how it's going to behave in the global environment. It didn't begin with Donald Trump. It actually began with Barack Obama, who had different attitudes about the extent of American engagement in global affairs. The questions about Europe and NATO became very important in the Obama administration. It didn't attract as much attention because I think there was a general agreement in Europe on the politics, the domestic politics of Obama, whereas now there is a radical discontent or disagreement with President Trump and the way he expresses the concerns about the transatlantic relationship are somewhat cruder, I would say, than Obama. But we're in a debate, and it's going to be a major debate for the United States because we are engaged, or we are entering in a world that is unfamiliar to the United States as a major global power. If you look back over the American policy since I would say since the outbreak of the Second World War, the main sort of avenues of American foreign policy thinking have been, first, you identify the existential threat to the United States, the main existential threat, and then you build a foreign policy around dealing with that threat. In the First or in the Second World War, it was fascism in the guise of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. And our policy, if you wanted a phrase for it, was unconditional surrender. We were successful in that to some extent, I would argue. A lot of help from other countries. Then the Cold War, obviously the Soviet Union, communism in the guise of the Soviet Union. The organizing principle is containment. And Americans look at that 40-year period, again, as a successful foreign policy. After the breakup of the Soviet Union, as many people noted, the United States had reached a situation where there wasn't an existential threat, so what was it going to do with its foreign policy? And we did drift for a while, but President Bush, the administration that I worked for, tried to turn terrorism into the existential threat, and his slogan for dealing with that was the Freedom Agenda, which actually went well beyond what the United States had done in terms of democracy promotion throughout its history, but particularly after, during the Cold War, and militarized it to a great degree. Iraq, Afghanistan are the great examples of that, but it was played out elsewhere. Terrorism turned out not to be an existential threat. It was very difficult to convince the American public. And so there's a certain, I think, temptation in Washington today on the part of some to look for that other existential threat that we can organize our foreign policy around. That explains some of the debate that we're having about China. But there are also, I think, other elements in the American political thinking at this point, and that is that the world really has become much more complex. Farther right? Much more complex. That we're not going to be able to find a single existential threat that exists in the form of the country. It's actually the things that Pierre was talking about that there are the existential threats. And we're going to see, I think, a very lively debate in the United States in the next few years about how we're going to deal with this, how we're going to shape our foreign policy. And it's going to be a difficult one because we don't have anything in the American tradition to reach back into to guide us on the way forward. So we're going to have to make this up as we go along, and we're going to have to learn a lot from the outside world and build a consensus in the United States. The time to do this, one would think, would be during a presidential election. It isn't going to happen this time around, and we rarely do this during presidential elections. It will happen after the presidential election. And I think if you look at this in the longer term, the key election in the United States is not going to be 2020, it's going to be 2024. And that is the point at which I would argue that the consensus will be reached in the United States, or something close to a consensus that will guide us for many, many years into the future. Now, just very briefly, I agree entirely with Pierre on the nature of the challenges. Where I would disagree is on dividing the world into status quo and revisionist powers, only because I think he made a very good argument that there isn't any status quo. Well, yesterday's world, well, that's the status quo ante. But I think everything is shifting. I think we agree. I think we agree on that. The point that I made yesterday is that we need to have a common sense of legitimacy. We need to have a consensus on how we're going to deal with these problems. And the great challenge, I think, for all of us is to reconcile a host of different differing views on that, to understand that each country, each major power has its own particular take on this, but we need to move beyond our own parochial concerns into a more global view if we're going to succeed going forward. This is something that Henry Kissinger did with his Soviet counterparts in the 1970s, not nearly as broad a consensus as we need now, but a way of dealing with what was a much different world from the one that preceded his turn in the U.S. government. So we need to find a way, build ourselves towards first a consensus in the United States, then a consensus on a global level on how we're going to deal with the 7 problems that Pierre laid out. That's going to require leadership, and it's going to require much more visionary leadership than we see certainly throughout the West, but I would argue in many other places in the world as well. I think one of the sort of mysteries of history is how great leaders emerge. And we go through cycles where we have great leaders, visionary leaders, who set the world in new directions and different directions. And then we go through periods where we have lackluster leadership, where people are conservative or inactive and so forth. How we get these great leaders is a big problem. My boss says that that is Dr. Kissinger, that the problem is that for the great statesman, you actually have to have a vision of where you want to take society, where you want to take the world, but it's a place that the world has never been, and so there's tremendous resistance along the way. So having the imagination, I talked a little bit about this yesterday, to pull out of all this tremendous change that we've seen, the threads that lead to the positive future for all of us is the real challenge. And the individuals that do that are going to be the great leaders of the 21st century. It's a problem that unfortunately is beyond, I think, the means of most current leaders. It's going to be a task that the next generation is going to have to take on. That's another way of saying I wish I were 30 or 40 years younger, because there's a tremendous opportunity for all of you to shape the world, to build that consensus. And so we get through this in a way that leads to I think, the prosperity that modern technology promises all of us. Let me end there.
You've used the question for me is how to survive till 2024. There are a lot of challenges ahead. This is the issue. What I like about the 45th President of United States, that at the final age of his first term, he did not launch the war, except the trade war. Because in such a position, both Mr. Obama and George Bush Jr., they already have their own wars, not Mr. Trump, except trade war. So let me switch to our Chinese friend. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Professor Dinkin. and thanks for inviting me to attend this great conference. Today, I will talk about the West-East relation in terms of economy. As we know, there are always many different answers to what's West and what's East. Nevertheless, Western Europe and the United States are surely of the West, and China and India are necessarily belonging to the East. And between the West and the East, the main difference often changes. In the pre-modern times, there are different on civilization and culture. And in the Cold War era, it's more on political ideology and values. And after the Cold War, I think the difference is mainly on the economic performances. I think the West mainly are developed economies represented by the United States and Japan and the European Union. And the East are emerging market economies represented by China, India, and Russia. Then, how is the West-East relation now? I'm inclined to believe that the contradiction and conflict is increasing, while the complementary and cooperation is decreasing. Since the Industrial Revolution, the West is always the leader and the East plays as the chaser. As the leader, the West has always had a dominant influence on the West-East relation. When the East is far behind the West in terms of economy and technology, the Western countries feel safe and comfortable. And the relation between them can go along well. Is perfectly exemplified in the early years of the Cold War. At that time, not only China and India, but also Russia is backward in comparison with the West. Therefore, the economic relation between them is generally good. China and India initiated new reforms in order to integrate into the West-dominated global value chain. And Russia, after comprehensive political and economic reforms, was given the market economic status by the West. In this period, the Western and Eastern countries cooperated with each other because all of them had very unique location and global value chain. In this value chain, the Western countries occupied the high-end and high-value added industries. They can get the highest profit margin, while the middle and low-end industries were shifted to developing countries like China and Southeast Asian countries, who become world factories of the world. Such a clear labor division benefited and satisfied both sides. Thus, that time can be seen as the golden age of the West-East relation. But such a golden age gradually disappeared with the Eastern countries ascending on global value chain. China is a good example. China not only maintained the competitive advantages on mid to low-end manufacturing sectors, but also have made breakthroughs in high-tech areas like 5G, AI application, quantum communication, and so on. It seems like the West is facing fierce competition from the East, even in the high-end and high-value-added industries that the Western countries have long boasted of. However, the advantage on high-end technology and high-value added industries are of vital importance for Western countries. These countries have long been troubled by low birth rate and aging population, rendering the young labor scarce. So in order to maintain high living standard as well as the superiority of their ideology, the developed economies have to concentrate the valuable labor resources on the highest value-added industries. This is why the Western countries were pleased with the out-migration of industries in the second half of the 20th century. However, even in the high-end industries, Western countries are also facing competitions from emerging economies. This makes them feel more difficult to make money, more difficult to project soft power. Therefore, they are inclined to adopt a more hostile attitude toward the emerging competitors. Just against such a background, Donald Trump became American president and advocated America First, promoted protectionism, and launched sanctions on Chinese high-tech entities. Some of our American allies also follow suit. Actually, the emerging economies have contributed a lot, not only to themselves, but also to the Western countries. The Western transnational corporations made a great amount of money in the emerging markets. And meanwhile, the general people in Western countries have enjoyed high standard of living by importing cheap products from the Eastern countries. But the Western countries failed in coping with internal income inequality, so that some groups are very hostile to globalization. Therefore, the current West-East contradiction at least partly results from the failed internal governance in Western countries. Since the Western countries are the dominant side in the West-East relation, if we want a cooperative rather than a hostile relation, it's necessary for us to try to improve the income distribution systems in Western countries and to prevent their internal contradictions from outflowing. Meanwhile, we also have to find an inclusive developing approach for the West and East. Through this approach, the Eastern emerging market economies should be able to keep on developing, while the competitive pressures on the West could be elevated. But such a win-win approach is very, very difficult to emerge, given that the global market has been so saturated that the players in it have no choice but to carry out a zero-sum game, no matter they are from the West or from the East. This is a bad deadlock, and the way to break it is to integrate more developing regions into globalization, is my own view. By this way, we can expand the global market to extend the global value chain and to create a huge labor division system. In one word, we should promote industrialization and globalization in more developing economies to cultivate more world factories like China. As we know, that only in South Asia there are 1.7 billion consumers. If economic takeoff occurs in all the developing regions, like South Asia, like Eurasia, the new larger global value chain will emerge, and the global market will dramatically expand, which will inevitably give rise to more cooperation opportunities for the West and the East. As for how to boost the industrialization of undeveloped regions, I believe creating more free trade areas is a feasible approach. Recently, there has been a big breakthrough in RCEP negotiation. 15 countries will make the first largest FTA in the world, no later than 2020. And India decided to stay out of RCEP until her most concerned issues are resolved. But at the same time, India also shows more active in promoting trade deals with the West, namely the US and the EU. All this signifies a reconstruction of the world value chain. In the meantime, the emerging connectivity initiatives will contribute to infrastructure investment and industry cooperation, which will create favorable conditions for the developing regions to integrate into a global value chain. Therefore, we have reason to believe that a remodeled and expanded global labor division system is emerging, and it will bring about opportunities for the West and the East to minimize conflicts and to promote cooperation. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much for presenting for us some positive scenarios, and I'm happy that you are pretty far from the so-called zero-sum game. I appreciate your attitude. Please, Вячеслав Иванович.
Спасибо. Находясь на Российско-Армянском университете, я хотел бы позволить себе роскошь высказаться на русском языке. Надеюсь, меня правильно. Вот если бы не было вчерашних очень полезных и глубоких дискуссий на этом прекрасном форуме, который, мне кажется, в общем-то удается и очень здорово удается, за что огромное спасибо организаторам, спасибо за приглашение тоже. 40 лет тому назад я бы, вот, натолкнувшись на такую тему, очень быстро бы с ней расправился простым способом. Я бы вам процитировал Киплинга: «East is East and West is West and they will never twain». Восток есть Восток, Запад есть Запад, и никогда они не встретятся. А сегодня, если бы я придерживался такой точки зрения, я бы изменил своему наставнику, учителю, старшему товарищу Евгению Максимовичу Примакову. Я бы изменил взгляду на то, что сегодняшние перемены в мире, они направлены на переход от биполярной системы к полицентричной системе. И вот в этом я вижу сегодня основную задачу разобраться в том, в каком направлении все-таки мы движемся. Вот для меня понятие, что такое Восток. Я родился в Сибири, в городе Иркутске, на берегу озера Байкал. И вот для меня лозунг «Turn East», поворот на восток, означает поворот к родной Сибири и к Дальнему Востоку. И я очень горжусь тем, что я все-таки не ошибаюсь, как показал недавний Дальневосточный форум и тот огромный, колоссальный интерес, который сейчас растет к нашему Дальнему Востоку и к Сибири, что это правильное направление перемен в мире. Мы очень много говорим о трагичном, об опасном, Да, вызовы и угрозы в 21 веке, но не только не уменьшились по сравнению с прошлым веком, а скорее здорово окрепли, усилились, стали более изощренными. И, конечно, весь мир встревожен ввиду непредсказуемости того, что будет завтра, послезавтра. Но если мы будем в наших взглядах на то, что происходит, ограничиваться только тревогой по поводу негатива в сегодняшнем мире, я думаю, что мы будем очень однобокими в своих взглядах на нашу прошлую историю, сегодняшний день и в том числе и на наше будущее. Я себя отношу к разряду исторических оптимистов, но хорошо информированных оптимистов. И в этом, наверное, заключается то, чего я хотел бы и от своих коллег, экспертов, которые занимаются делами международными, чтобы они не ограничивались анализом только тех разрушительных процессов, которыми сегодня сопровождается переход от двуполярного мира к полицентричному миру. И меня радует то, что вот мой китайский товарищ, он не стал сосредотачиваться на негативе, а показал и те позитивные моменты, которые происходят в этот переходный период. Я бы хотел сказать о том, что вчера в ходе одной из дискуссий, в одном из выступлений, кажется, ректора антропологического института, была ссылка на то, что может лежать в основе системы международных отношений. Хотите, можно назвать по-другому. Система международной безопасности. Короче говоря, world system. Можно сказать world order. Что лежит в основе? Самое главное – многосторонние и долговременные торгово-экономические и финансовые связи. И вот я, стараясь проанализировать происходящее, я обращаю большое внимание на то, с какими инициативами сегодня выступают достаточно видные мировые державы, пытаясь выстроить будущую архитектуру международной безопасности. И я бы для вас предложил рассмотреть 3 схемы, которые, на мой взгляд, себя уже обозначили и будут и далее обозначать себя не только как конкурирующие, но временами и взаимно дополняющие. Это первое. Это китайский вариант «один пояс, один путь». Это просто огромная, я бы сказал, мега-схема, мегапроект, в основе которого лежит экономика. Это не только трубопроводы, не только логистика в целом, но это огромное движение капиталов, огромное движение человеческого материала, человеческого капитала. Это то, что вовлекает в мирные, созидательные процессы огромные многомиллионные массы населения. И идея одного пояса, одного пути, она, естественно, находится на начальном этапе, и у кого-то она вызывает настороженность. До последнего времени такая настороженность была у Индии, но в результате последних 2 лет, в результате личных, неформальных контактов лидеров 2 стран, вот этот ледок начинает рассеиваться. И президент Си, будучи в Ченае, в индийском порту, назвал этот порт как возможный транзитный пункт на одном из направлений шелкового пути современности. Это очень и очень важное замечание, очень важный момент. И надо сказать, что премьер Моди на это отреагировал весьма благосклонно, я бы так сказал, для начала. Вот этот процесс, он поощряет и Россию к тому, чтобы активнее посмотреть на свое участие в проекте «Один пояс, один путь», но в несколько ином варианте. В варианте, когда этот пояс шел бы не только с востока на запад и с запада на восток, но и с севера на юг, и с юга на север. Идея международного транспортного коридора север-юг, в которой заинтересованы Индия, Иран, тот же Пакистан, естественно, Азербайджан. Я думаю, что Армения, если внимательно приглядеться к этому проекту, тоже будет заинтересована в участии в этом проекте. А финансирование этого проекта, опять-таки, может быть обеспечено новым банком развития, организацией, которая называется БРИКС. Последний саммит показал, что те капиталы, которыми располагает сегодня этот банк, он позволяет финансировать очень крупные проекты. 100 миллиардов долларов – это капитал этого банка. Извините. И поэтому, наверное, можно принять какие-то меры для того, чтобы рассмотреть возможность более активного участия в рамках БРИКС России, Индии и Китая в направлении финансирования этого пути север-юг, который может стать составной частью китайской идеи «один пояс, один путь», который включал бы в себя то, что интересно для Китая. Это Скандинавию, это Европу. Я говорю об этом очень предметно и конкретно, поскольку можно очень долго обсуждать теоретические проблемы, но вот есть конкретная абсолютно проблема, которая волнует огромное количество населения, огромное количество стран. Вот этим нужно и можно, самое главное, заниматься. Есть признаки того, что мы можем пойти по пути поиска большего количества позитива в меняющемся мире, потому что сосредотачиваться только на негативе – это не видеть выхода из этой ситуации, и, вернее, не искать выхода из этой ситуации. Второй вариант, который тоже следовало бы рассмотреть очень внимательно, он касается тоже вопросов евразийской безопасности, это Евразийский экономический союз. Это идея, конечно, российская, и она заслуживает большего внимания со стороны и наших соседей по СНГ. Она уже привлекает внимание той же самой Индии, и в скором времени начнутся реальные переговоры о создании зоны свободной торговли между Евразес и Индией. Это очень и очень практически прочный фундамент, опять-таки, под архитектуру, новую архитектуру международной безопасности на таком огромном континенте, как Евразия. То есть есть, опять-таки, серьезные, позитивные движения, которые могут развиваться в том случае, если мы будем на них концентрироваться, если мы не будем сосредотачиваться и только жаловаться на то, как все плохо, как все нехорошо в этом мире. Понимаете, дело в том, что сегодня, если объективно посмотреть на ситуацию, конечно, разрушительная сторона процессов, она гораздо выпуклее, чем то, что можно назвать негативом. Но, как правило, всегда риски создают и какие-то возможности. Вот здесь нужно задуматься над тем, чтобы на фоне рисков заниматься их уменьшением и, наоборот, расчисткой пространства для больших возможностей, которые представляет изменение мироустройства. Это очень важный, на мой взгляд, вопрос, этим надо заниматься каждодневно. Мне хотелось бы еще отметить, что на фоне вот этих двух очень практичных идей реализуется идея сугубо военного характера. Это так называемый ромб. Это идея индо-тихоокеанской безопасности, в которую входят Соединенные Штаты, инициаторы этого ромба, Япония, Австралия, и в которую очень активно втягивается Индия. Основа этого блока, это даже не блок, конечно, основа этой группировки, это основа сугубо военная. Вот она в себе несет минимальный позитивный заряд. Я не хочу начисто отвергать эту идею, так сказать, гарантии безопасности морского судоходства, передвижения товаров, передвижение, особенно сейчас, когда очень активно используются танкеры, используются газовозы, понимаете, это важно, обеспечивать безопасность морских путей, но это еще не гарантирует развитие тесных связей торгово-экономического, финансового порядка, которые являются основой любой устойчивой архитектуры международной безопасности. Несколько слов в отношении тех проблем, которые реально существуют, но которые неоднозначно воспринимаются в сегодняшнем мире, особенно вот в период вот этот переходный. Климатические изменения, экологические проблемы. Можно улыбнуться над наивностью шведской девочки, можно где-то даже заподозрить в том, что ею манипулируют какие-то черные силы. Наверняка возможно и такое. Но, понимаете, мне ее взгляды на будущее планеты, на будущее ее поколения и поколения после нее, они мне гораздо ближе и понятнее, чем позиция господина Трампа, для которого этой проблемы не существует. И даже то, где Соединенные Штаты участвовали, Парижские соглашения, сегодня для них ничего из себя не представляют. США были инициаторами Киотского протокола, который они точно так же успешно зачеркнули. Поэтому, наверное, нужно очень внимательно посмотреть на то, какую планету наше поколение оставит следующим поколениям. Это исключительно важно. Понять это могут не все. Сегодняшние сиюминутные интересы, они заслоняют вот эту проблему экологических изменений. Но эти изменения неизбежны. И я вам хотел бы сказать, что в период, когда Евгений Максимович Примаков руководил службой внешней разведки, мы занимались созданием закона Российской Федерации о внешней разведке. В 1995 году, уже после ухода Евгения Максимовича в МИД, этот закон был принят в России. В этом законе прописаны 5 важнейших направлений обеспечения безопасности, которые возложены на службу внешней разведки. Это обеспечение политической, экономической, научно-технологической, военной и экологической безопасности. Это было записано в законе 1995 года. Я горжусь тем, что вот разведка под руководством Евгения Максимовича Примакова вот таким образом тоже пыталась заглянуть за горизонт. И она продолжает работать в этом направлении. И здесь, конечно, шведская девочка нам помощник, она наш союзник. Мы можем это только приветствовать. Ну, можно много еще говорить на тему того, как могут сочетаться интересы так называемого Востока, так называемого Запада. Во всяком случае, мне представляется, что вчерашние беседы и сегодняшние выступления моих коллег, они, в общем-то, дадут вам представление о том, в каком направлении думал Евгений Максимович Примаков, какие вызовы и угрозы он считал основными, и во имя которых нам надо дальше работать. Спасибо.
Большое спасибо, Вячеслав Иванович. У нас выступило 4 панелиста, и примерно точки зрения поделились поровну. Выступления генерала Трубникова и нашего китайского коллеги были, наверное, более оптимистическими, чем выступления наших друзей из Соединенных Штатов и из Франции. И вот с этим напутствием я передаю слово профессору Войтоловскому, который, может быть, как-то склонит чашу весов в ту или другую сторону.
Спасибо, Александр Александрович. Уважаемые коллеги, друзья, спасибо. Я еще раз хочу сказать, что для меня большая честь быть здесь, и я очень признателен Российско-Армянскому университету за это приглашение. Я прошу дать презентацию на экран. Спасибо большое. Я буду говорить по-английски, чтобы было проще понимать меня участникам дискуссии, всем и коллегам, которые не говорят по-русски. So, we are talking a lot about polycentricity of the international order. And we are mentioning that China is on the rise, the United States are stable or declining or whatever. But what is real polycentricity look like? It looks like this. It's the share of global GDP group dynamics. And these statistics are from IMMO's statistical department. And here you can see that yes, the United States are growing and doing good. And American economy is doing good. China is doing very good and also growing fast. And here you see the real polycentricity. Yes, China is step by step following the United States in terms of growth of GDP. European Union is also doing good. And the world economy looks not bad in current situation. What is the main risk for everybody? The new recession, a significant recession, or significant new financial and economic crisis. We shouldn't exaggerate this risk, but we have to think about factors which are influencing on the global economy, which has already become global and interdependent. And I think that the main feature of, the first main feature of polycentric, emerging polycentric world order is in fact that it is going more and more interdependent. But the second feature of this system is that it is becoming more and more competitive. So I'm not optimist or I'm not pessimist. I'm trying to give diagnosis of this system. This system is emerging to something absolutely new. Today in the morning we had discussion with our German colleague, Professor Spanger, and we were discussing the risk of weaponizing globalization. When some countries with some capabilities in the sphere of finance, in the sphere of trade, in the sphere of investment, can use and are using this interdependence to have impact, to influence on economic and sometimes political development and foreign policy and decision making in other countries. We are talking a lot, how to use it? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay, too fast. Oh, good. So, when we're talking about weaponizing of globalization, we should first be focused on dynamics of US-China trade. And we're talking a lot about trade wars. Donald Trump has tried to, and any foreign policy decision, any trade decision, is always based on some domestic political reasons. Donald Trump, coming to his presidential position, was promising that he will have, some rightful decisions. He will make some rightful decisions to protect American producers, to change the imbalance in U.S.-China trade, and to bring trade with China to more, stable, more balanced, more rightful, and more justifiable position. But how he is doing this and how he is moving to this? The idea of rising tariffs and the idea of the concept of new protectionism, which to some extent is developing in American trade and foreign policy and economic narrative, is influencing, of course, on trade. And maybe this year we will finally see some results of the trade policy of Donald Trump. But if we look attentively to figures of 2017 and 2018, we will see that the trade between China and the United States is still growing. When it dropped in 2016, before Donald Trump has been elected. And according to figures of this year, look at absolutely fantastic figures of 2017 and 2018. 659 billions and .8 in trade turnover, and this trade turnover only in goods. I'm not including services in this trade. If we are including services, it will be 100 billions of US dollars more. And these statistics are from US trade representative, and they are counting Hong Kong as a separate, body, and there will be 87, 88, I don't remember exactly, 87 or 88 billions in trade turnover in goods only between the United States and Hong Kong. So the figures are absolutely fantastic. They are comparable only with figures of trade of the United States with Mexico. With Mexico, they have about 671 billions of US dollars in trade turnover in goods and services. And they are also comparable to figures of trade between the United States and European Union, which are now mounting to 730 something billions of US dollars. So these figures are fantastic. These figures are showing how interdependent China and the United States are. And according to statistics of this year, we only have some estimates. We do not have final figures even for the first 2 quarters, but according to preliminary statistics, the trade between the United States and China dropped in the first 2 quarters to 13% of, it's a huge amount in goods, huge amount in goods. But what these figures are also showing, that the balance is not changing. The imports from China to the United States are dropping down, but together with exports from the United States to China, and this balance is still the same. The same figures if we will compare them, and that's paradox of this interdependence. And I think that there are 2 positions in American foreign policy decision-making community, and among American economists. One is to be, more tough in trade negotiations with China, to put pressure on China, to bring China to compromises which will be not real compromises, but will make China do what America is saying. Another position, which is much more pragmatic and much more realist, to be focused on the world economy in general, to be focused on American economy and its stability, to be focused on benefits which American business and American companies can get in case of more, balanced compromise. And recently, I have seen, maybe a week ago, a little bit more, I have seen an interview with Henry Kissinger, who was one of the brightest minds, still one of the brightest minds in American foreign policy, who was urging American decision makers to not to go to the way of so-called decoupling between the United States and China, because it will be harmful for both sides, as he says, and harmful for the world economy. I think that we are still, puzzled with current situation. By which track these trade negotiations, this very hard political and economic decision-making will go? We do not know the exact scenario. There can be two varieties, but these varieties are deeply, strongly interconnected with political trends in domestic politics in the United States, in domestic politics in China, and to which extent both countries are really ready to get to what we are calling in our scenarios at IMMO the new bipolarity. To which extent they are ready to go for competition, not only in economy, not only in technology. And we have seen recently, during the last 2 years, pressure which the United States tried to put on on the Chinese technological leaders, companies ZTE and Huawei, and this pressure was absolutely non-market pressure. But another scenario which can lead to such bipolarity, which can lead to a real conflict between the United States and China in next decades, is also on the table. You can see figures of military expenditures of leading powers. There is no Saudi Arabia, which should be there after People's Republic of China and before Russia and before India. But here we see that the dynamics of American military expenditures and Chinese military expenditures are obvious. Both of them are growing. And Chinese military expenditures are growing in fantastic dynamics. But it doesn't mean that China is preparing for a war or something with the United States or with any regional power in Asia Pacific. It means that China is trying to stabilize its economic disbalances, its dependence on world economy and on external markets with their growing military power. They are trying to catch their growing economic potential with growing military power. And China is trying to develop all types of military capabilities, including air, sea, and all technological and all progressive technologies, including missile defense, including surveillance, including also ballistic missiles, ground-based and non-ground-based, air-based missiles, sea-based missiles. China is also developing its nuclear potential, and China is not relying on strategic nuclear potential like Soviet Union and the United States did, and Russia and the United States are doing, but trying to develop different sorts of capabilities. So you see that there are different scenarios of development of the international system, and military political issues are becoming more and more interconnected with economic. And here, Belt and Road Initiative has been mentioned. And it has two dimensions. First dimension is development of new markets and the reaching of new markets by Chinese companies, and very positive ideas and goals in terms of development of infrastructure and maritime and ground-based and ground belt and road routes. But at the same time, China is trying to have also very significant military political result of this project, to have alternative ways to provide Chinese exports and imports, to provide China with resources, and to reach markets for Chinese production in case situation in Asia Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific region, will get worse and worse, because China is very, very dependent on sea routes. And what is China really afraid of is attempts of the United States to put pressure on sea and to organize a sort of military maritime blockade of China in the future in case of conflict. And all this are showing us the future of international system, global dynamics. How this world will look like will highly dependent not only on major powers, but on all responsible actors of international community, including small and medium powers. So I think that we are entering into the phase of real instability and development of the new international system. And I hope that this development will be peaceful. Thank you.
Sure. Федор Генрихович, спасибо большое за ваш оптимизм. Вы, наверное, все-таки склоняете чашу весов в сторону оптимистов. Я с большим удовольствием предоставляю слово госпоже Шива Ализаде. Прошу вас. Шива Ализаде, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'd like to thank Professor Darbynian and his colleagues for organizing this wonderful conference. And I should admit that words are powerless to express my gratitude to Professor Asatrian, Dr. Arkleva, and their colleagues in the Oriental Institute of the Russian-Armenian University for their hospitality and kindness. Now let's go back to the panel's topic. In the global arena, we can distinguish between two groups of state actors. But I'm not sure if we can call them East and West. This classification sounds a bit outdated to me. I prefer to say West and non-West, because non-West is not a unitary complex. Very different countries account for this block. On one side, we have Atlantic community, and on the other side, we have emerging powers or re-emerging powers. These two groups are different in terms of value systems, so their competition has an ideational aspect, which also reflects conflicting material interests. The emerging powers bloc, which is represented mainly by Russia, I think, and maybe other BRICS members, opposes unilateralism and supports consolidating the sovereignty of nation states. For this bloc, sovereignty is the supreme value shaping international relations. And a state is the recipient of the nation's continuity and its essence. And challenging the state can put the stability of the society at risk. However, once the Cold War was over, the winner side, United States and its allies, expected Russia to agree to a subaltern status and considered their own model universal and appropriate in any context, irrespective of cultural or local peculiarities. And that's why we have seen that Russia has been facing soft containment, neo-containment, and etc. Now I want to start the questions and ask my colleagues how they see future prospects of the relations between these two groups of states. And I want to ask if we can expect a great powers consensus like the one which was achieved in 1815 or the one which was achieved in 1945 anytime soon. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. I guess we'll have one more panel answering your question. It's so comprehensive. You have a question. I guess we have time for 2-3 questions, no more. So I'll see 1, 2, 3, 4. Finish. Please introduce yourself and make a question.
Journalism, Russian-Armenian University. Господин Дынкин, один вопрос. So my question is addressed to Mr. Graham, Professor. Thank you for your speech. As it was voiced here, the issue at stake is to find a common ground, a consensus, shared legitimacy on the global arena. And you have highlighted the role of visionary leadership as a way of resolution of this and other issues. My questions are, what are the key qualities of such a person, of such a leader? And could you draw any historical parallels? And who is this person? Thank you.
Exercising my power as a moderator, I suggest that all questions would be raised and then we would answer, please.
Thank you very much for sharing your deep insights with us. I'm Hasmik, and I'm a political scientist. My question is addressed to Professor Graham. So I have 2 questions. First, one on NATO, because these big divisions have been discussed between NATO allies. So I was wondering, given the history, let's say at the Cold War time, there were divisions given the Suez crisis, or in 1974 when Turkey invaded Cyprus, or more when it comes to the recent history back in 2003, given the Iraq war, Turkey refused to provide United States its territory to open northern front, and I can go on. My point is this, that divisions used to be in NATO even before. What makes current divisions different from the ones before, and are those existential for NATO? What do you think? My second question, again addressed to you, Professor. So it's about United States foreign policy pertaining to the Middle East. Do you see United States withdrawing from the Middle East? And I'm talking here particularly about the Gulf region, given the very high strategic interest for the region, globally speaking, and for the US foreign policy in the Middle East. And how would you assess United States policy towards Iran? Thank you so much.
Please.
Dear Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Mahesh Saakyan. I am heading in Yerevan, China-Russia Council for Political and Strategic Research Foundation, and I am also lecturer at Russian-Armenian University. And our generation testimonies knew the end of arms control system, and we see also new arms race between great powers. And my question is for Professor Wojtalowski and Professor Graham. Maybe our Chinese partner can also contribute his 50 cents in these discussions. And what do you think, which kind of step must implement international society for reconstructing arms control system, and what kind of recommendation do you have for small states in the era of destruction of arms control system? Thank you.
Please, mic here.
Мой вопрос будет адресован господину Трубникову, но прежде я просто хотел бы поблагодарить за вот эту интересную, за возможность принять участие в этой очень интересной, в работе этой интересной конференции. Что я для себя вынес? То, что те цивилизации, которые условно принято называть восточными, сегодня чувствуют себя как-то несколько дискомфортно вот в этих лекалах 18-19, европоцентристских лекалах 18-19 века. И, как я понял, вот из выступлений большинства наших гостей, которые условно представляют восточные цивилизации, они как бы не совсем сегодня согласны с этими какими-то немножко устаревшими клише, с устаревшей терминологией. Теперь, что касается вот непосредственно вопроса, я благодарен за очень интересное выступление, за интересный доклад. Но я думаю, не только у меня, вот у большинства присутствующих, наверное, вот как-то резануло ухо, когда вы говорили о том, что вот этот, значит, шелковый путь, который должен иметь еще и вот другое направление, север-юг, юг-север, он пройдет через наш регион. Но вот как-то вы не совсем как бы, ну, не было понятно, все-таки пройдет он через Армению или нет. Понятное дело, что Армения очень заинтересована, она всегда была и будет заинтересована в том, чтобы вот этот перекресток, он прошел также и через нашу республику. Но понятное дело, что мяч на половине великих держав, те, которые являются инициаторами этого проекта, ну и те, кто являются двигателем, мотором вот этого всего. Вот ваша информация какова? Пройдет он через Армению или опять обойдет, опять мы останемся вот на скамейке запасных по традиции? Спасибо.
So we stop the questions. So I guess we'll start with. You insisted. Вы настаиваете? Final among finals.
Thank you for the chance. У меня вопрос к господину Войtalовскому. Господин Войtalовский, мы все знаем, что политика мусульманских государств, в частности Турции, Казахстана, Азербайджана, базируется в идеологии пантуркизма. Какова должна быть позиция России и США вот в контексте этой политики этих государств? Они, президенты этих государств ни разу заявляют об этом, и мне очень интересна позиция России и США вот в контексте этой политики. Спасибо.
So let's start answering. I suggest Professor Wojtalowski. May you start, please?
Thank you very much. I would like to start my answering with the question which Professor Elizadeh suggested for the whole group of experts sitting here. I do not think that any form of conference or some assembly like we used to have with Vienna Congress or we used to have with Yalta, Tehran and Potsdam conferences can be achieved in current world order. Both of examples which Professor Elizadeh suggested were based on the experience of two wars, real wars, world wars. The third one after First World War also has happened. And now we cannot afford to have real war among great powers. We cannot afford it militarily. We cannot afford it economically and politically. I wouldn't quote Einstein, but a lot of people would in such situation that it doesn't matter with what weapon the third World War will be going, but the Fourth World War will be with stones and sticks. But we cannot afford real war, and the transformation of world order is going peacefully. On the one hand, it's good, it's very good. It's you know, good for everybody. But on the other hand, it's not so easy as it used to be before, when, you know, decision makers collected and were arranging maps and you know, territories of states and arranging the balance of power and the rules of this world order. I had a very good question from Dr. Saakyan on arms control. You know, what we see now, that the system is eclipsing very quickly. And I think that the idea of free hands, which existed for decades in American political narratives, of free hands in the sphere of arms control, has started to prevail. Not, you know, political narrative, but also decision makers. John Bolton, who was one of the biggest representatives of this idea of free hands in the sphere of arms control, the world without any you know, treatments and agreements, treaties and agreements, is gone from administration. But the idea is still living. So the United States left in 2002 missile defense treaty. In 2019, and they initiated in 2018, they left INF treaty. Now the future of START treaty, actual START treaty, is on the table. And we have very controversial signals from American sides. On the one hand, Trump's administration has mentioned in nuclear posture review in 2018, before Donald Trump, before John Bolton appeared in the administration, they mentioned that they are interested in dialogue with Russia on the future of START treaty, and interested in negotiations with Russia on some possible new treaty on these issues. But right now we see that time is going, and we do not see open and exact position. Are they interested in prolonging actual START treaty for next 5 years or not? If it will be prolonged, it's one picture. If it will be not, it's another picture. Not only of because of you know, non-existing of such treaty, but because with this treaty we can lose confidence-building measures. We can lose other instruments which are giving both sides predictable picture of development of both countries in the sphere of strategic offensive weapons. Only in strategic offensive weapons. Of course, current START treaty doesn't include, you know, new technological developments in the sphere of R&D, but they are not deployed. They are in the sphere of R&D still. They will appear and will be, you know, will become part of strategic nuclear capabilities in the future. And if, in case we would have these 5 years, we would see this future, and we would arrange something for new systems possibly. But what is really, you know, what is really surprising me, that our Chinese friends are not showing real interest towards, you know, real engagement into international arms control system. Of course, China is a very responsible participant of non-proliferation treaty. China is supporting Russia's initiative against militarization of space. But at the same time, China is not showing any interest, real interest for negotiations on strategic nuclear weapons and even on intermediate and short-range missiles. You know, when John Bolton came to Moscow last year, he has openly saying that, okay guys, don't worry about the United States leaving INF. We are planning to deploy ground-based intermediate and short-range missiles, but they will be not against you. They will be against China. And we will deploy them in Asia-Pacific. So in Europe, we're not planning right now to deploy anything. How can real political thinkers, how can and decision makers, how can military people believe in such categories? You know, military people are thinking in categories of capabilities, not in categories of intentions. If we see capabilities, if military people see capabilities, it means that someday they will be deployed and possibly used. So we are on the same boat with our French, British, Indian and Chinese colleagues, and we need to think what we can do on global level to change this environment and what we can do together with the United States, not against the United States. It's a very significant issue. And I also have a question about pan-Turkism. I'm not a specialist in this field, but I know that Kazakhstan is not using pan-Turkism as official ideology. I don't know about Azerbaijan at all, but Turkey, you know, they have different attitudes towards pan-Turkism, even in Turkish political, you know, elite and political thinkers. But I think that pan-Turkism is an idea which emerged from cultural and linguistical grounds, and it shouldn't be, you know, perceived in, you know, political or military way. It should be analyzed. It should be perceived in different ways. But and of course, sometimes it can cause some cautiousness and some very specific attention. But I do not see any real threat right now in pan-Turkism. Maybe in the future. I don't know.
Большое спасибо. Я прошу Вячеслава Ивановича взять микрофон.
Спасибо за вопрос. Но до сегодняшнего дня ведь еще нет и каких-либо четких взглядов на сочленение китайской идеи «один пояс, один путь» и идеи транспортного коридора север-юг. Транспортный коридор север-юг пока что создается независимо от китайской идеи. Идея сама по себе транспортного коридора север-юг вот, уже насчитывает больше 15 лет как таковых. Очень много проблем, связанных прежде всего с логистикой, с финансовым, таможенным обеспечением, железнодорожным транспортом, разноколейность, проблемой контейнеровозов через Каспийское море, куда и как эти контейнеры могут быть использованы без простоя. Это тоже большая проблема. Пока что я лично вижу заинтересованность Армении в том, чтобы оказаться прежде всего на участке шелкового пути. Но все зависит от той позиции, которую Армения сама для себя может определить и выбрать. В чем интерес Армении в участии в этих проектах? Видит ли Армения себя как транзитный пункт? Видит ли себя как экспортером или импортером товаров? Это все зависит не от внешних сил, а зависит прежде всего от собственной позиции Армении.
Спасибо, Вячеслав Иванович. Том, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much, Alexander. These are wonderful questions. Let me take them in reverse order. I'll start with the question on arms control. You know, the arms control is
was largely, that's been built up over the past 40 or 50 years, has been largely bilateral between the United States, the Soviet Union, and then Russia. It has broken down over the past 20 years because it's no longer adequate to the environment that we see emerging. There are reasons why the United States withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile system that have nothing to do with Russia. It had to do with developments outside of Russia, particularly Iran and North Korea. But not only those two countries, a broader concern about the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We withdrew from the INF Treaty in part because we also thought that that was not adequate to the current environment. And it wasn't because of Russia's actions in particular. In fact, it was Russia that came to us in the Bush administration asking whether we would want to modify or undo the INF Treaty because they didn't feel it was adequate to the challenges they faced. The fact is that there are a number of countries in Asia that are developing these types of weapon systems, and the question was why Russia and the United States should be constrained in developing their own if they see a way that this can advance their own security and stability. China, India, North Korea, Iran, there are probably half a dozen or so countries that have these. But I think the larger question, or the larger issue here is that the environment for nuclear or strategic stability is changing radically. The nuclear question itself is becoming multipolar. The United States and Russia still obviously the dominant powers, but China's a factor, India, Pakistan are factors as well as we think about the nuclear realm. We also have, because of technological advances, developed conventional weapons that can perform the types of services that only nuclear weapons once could in striking hard targets, for example, which means that strategic stability doesn't only depend on the balance between nuclear forces on either side, it's also conventional capabilities. And of course, we also have the emerging field of cyberspace, which also has strategic consequences, and is an area that has a very low threshold for entry. So we're seeing there are dozens of countries already that have these types of capabilities. And so what we need is to develop a new concept for strategic stability. What are the requirements of strategic stability in the world in which we exist, the world that we can see developing, as opposed to what were the requirements for strategic stability 30, 40, or 50 years ago. And so what we need at this point is to engage in a broader discussion about this. Now, I also think that the new START Treaty, OSN, that 3 is obsolete or is becoming obsolete. It doesn't control a lot of weapons that are going to be of concern, but I also think it's important to maintain it at this point as an element that allows us to build a bridge to a new arms control regime. The Chinese need to be involved at some point in a discussion of strategic stability. We're going to need to bring in a number of other countries as well. But I still believe that the United States and Russia have a special responsibility in this area. We also have a unique experience in thinking through what the requirements are for strategic stability. And so my recommendation would be that these two countries take it on themselves to think through those consequences. What does strategic stability look like? What is the arms control regime that is adequate to this new type of stability? And then sell that argument to the other countries that need to participate at some point. I think it's problematic that the United States at this point, either one seems disinclined to engage in these conversations, or two, given the disarray at the higher levels of our government now, it's simply not in a position to develop the ideas that are necessary. Now, that said, a lot of thinking is going on in this in expert circles in the United States. I think something similar is going on in Russia. This is a real, I think, opportunity for the expert communities to think through what is a very complicated problem when the political leadership and the politics in the two countries won't allow the governments to do this. So the expert communities have a real responsibility to get together, and that's beginning. So I think that's a hopeful sign. On the other questions, the Middle East, I can assure you the United States is not withdrawing from the Middle East. The Middle East is not Syria. The American commitment to Syria was never very large. The Obama administration resisted putting in substantial number of forces. President Trump has withdrawn maybe a substantial part of those forces, but the numbers aren't really that large. The fact is that Syria has been a close client state of Russia for 40 or 50 years. The American reduction of forces, the limited American commitment to Syria is really a recognition that our interests haven't been deeply involved there, that this is a country that's much closer to Russia, and we're simply not prepared to pay the cost that would have been required to exercise a significant influence on the nature of the domestic politics in Syria. But the United States remains committed to its partners in the Gulf region. It remains committed to Israel, maybe overcommitted, some people would say at this point. We still have a very good relationship with the Egyptians, and you go through the list. Trump hasn't changed much of this at all. I think what's problematic when you're dealing with the Trump administration is it's not clear what the actual strategy is. And one of the challenges going forward for either a second term for Trump or for the next American administration is to develop the strategic rationale for why our troops are there and develop it in a way that you can explain to the American public so that you have the domestic support for whatever you're trying to do in the Middle East. On NATO, you're right. There have been throughout NATO's existence tensions between the allies on a range of issues. The issue of burden sharing, how much the Europeans should pay for security, has been a perennial issue that goes back actually to the founding of NATO, has become somewhat more intense in recent years. I think what is different now from the past is that the president himself has expressed doubts about NATO and about the overall relationship between the United States and Europe. That's somewhat different, but support for the transatlantic community, for NATO, is still very deep in the American government, and I think in the American political establishment. And there are still extensive ties. I mean, NATO is still functioning at this point. The integrated command still works. We are exercising together. We are developing plans for increasing the necessary capabilities for NATO among all NATO members. And NATO allies, European allies, are in fact paying more attention to their own defense and increasing their defense capabilities. Now, the point I would make on this is I think that setting a percentage of GDP for defense expenditures is not the way to go. The way you ought to do this is determine what first what your goals are, what your mission is, what you're trying to accomplish in the world, then the resources that you need in order to accomplish that, and then how individual members of NATO are going to contribute to the achievement of that goal. So I see the question not so much in increased defense spending in Europe as much as I see in better coordination among the European allies of how they build their defense budgets, how they think about security, so that it can provide a greater asset to NATO going forward. So that's where I would end on the NATO question. I don't think NATO is going to go away anytime soon. It faces a challenge in defining its mission, and that mission has to be something other than simply containing Russia if it's going to exist over the longer term. And then finally, on leadership and visionary leadership, what you need in order to perform this function, I think, is a very deep understanding of history, an understanding how these complex problems of global affairs have been decided in the past. Now, it's very, history doesn't repeat itself. Someone said it doesn't repeat itself, it does rhyme. There's a certain truth to that. History does teach by analogy, and again, the analogies aren't perfect, but as you see great statesmen sort of dealing with the complex problems of your time, you get a sense of the questions you need to ask, the way you need to think about the future, and then you also get to see the results. So you get a sense of how much further into the future leaders need to be able to see or to imagine to affect the types of results they do in the present. If you're looking for sort of recent examples, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these are connected with the end of wars, when big questions arose as to what the future was going to look like. You look at Franklin Roosevelt and the people around him at the end of the Second World War that laid the foundation for the liberal world order that we think is under threat at this point. Dean Acheson, as Secretary of State, wrote a wonderful book called President at Creation, which shows the thinking, the politics at play as the American government tried to think through what the requirements were for stability, for security, for prosperity after the devastation of the Second World War, and in the face of what they saw as an ideological challenge from the Soviet Union at that point. If you want a non-American example, I think you look back to the Congress of Vienna in 1814-1815 after the Napoleonic Wars, particularly Metternich, sort of thinking through what the challenges were to maintaining the Austrian Empire at that point, but also looking well into the future. And both the Congress of Vienna and the post-Second World War vision actually created a security order that survived for 40 or 50 years, which is actually quite well in historical by historical standards. If you want to think of something that's not directly related to the consequences of global warfare, I think you look at Otto von Bismarck and the vision he had for Germany and how united Germany, which was thought out far in advance, and a project that was accomplished over decades. Again, a visionary leader, again in the national context, who saw a problem, saw the way to, saw what the solution, the vision, the end goal that he wanted to achieve, and then develop the appropriate tactics for getting there. So read your history and read your history about some of the great statesmen in the past, and I think that gives you a sense of the qualities, but also the way you go about dealing with complex problems of security and prosperity in the current world.
Большое спасибо, Том. А у меня одно маленькое комментарий по поводу Египта. После того, как президент Обама оставил своего давнего союзника, президента Мубарака, и поддержал президента Мурси, который принадлежал к партии братьев-мусульман, страна чуть не взорвалась. И только благодаря генералу как бы Египет успокоился. Поэтому я думаю, что доверие к американской политике в Египте сегодня не самое прочное. Коллеги, но мы завершаем нашу двухдневную работу. Я искренне благодарю панелистов. Я думаю, что это была одна из самых интересных панелей. Господин Ильюш просил извиниться, потому что у него сейчас происходит аппоинтмент с министром иностранных дел Республики Армения. Я думаю, что вы все увидели, что тот предмет, которым мы занимаемся, он интересен и отчасти неисчерпаем. И я смотрел за вами, я видел ваши глаза, мне казалось, что вам было интересно, вы задавали умные вопросы, и спасибо вам за это. Действительно, мировой порядок сегодня в беспорядке, если можно употребить такое выражение. Вы знаете, из прошлого осталось очень мало. Из прошлого осталось то, что только две страны способны уничтожить друг друга за 30-40 минут, и вы знаете, как эти страны называются. Поэтому проблема контроля над вооружениями, она очень острая и очень важная. Но, понимаете, вот если ракеты средней дальности будут размещены на севере Эстонии, то оттуда до Дворцовой площади Санкт-Петербурга 1 минута. И тут уже, понимаете, только искусственный интеллект. И это очень опасно, если вот эти решения как бы ответ на встречном ударе или какие-то другие будут приниматься в дефиците времени. Это очень опасно. Поэтому я согласен с Томом о том, что действительно изменился геополитический ландшафт. Новые технологии привели к тому, что появляются новые виды вооружений. Но все-таки сохранение вот того, что было, того фундамента, если бы вы видели, как выглядит этот том соглашения «Старт», это 180 страниц, где очень много прописано, взаимные инспекции регулярные, инспекции по требованиям. Поэтому это снимало всегда напряжение в генеральных штабах. Если есть какой-то вопрос, всегда можно запросить инспекцию и проверить на месте. Если этого не будет, мы вступаем в непредсказуемый мир. Теперь я хочу повторить вот мысль профессора Грэма, которую он высказал в июне этого года, да, на примаковских чтениях в Москве, о том, что возможный глобальный кризис, он будет отличаться от предыдущих кризисов тем, что у него причины политические. Это прежде всего торговая война между США и Китаем, это Брексит, это отчасти блокада Ирана и так далее. То есть вот в этом новизна этой ситуации. Но я думаю, что не в интересах 45-го президента Соединенных Штатов, чтобы этот кризис случился до ноября месяца следующего года. Отсюда я вижу вот эти попытки снизить накал торговой войны, вот эти разговоры о первой фазе, о том, что будет фазированно отменяться взаимное обложение налогами, это признак того, что Трамп осознал вот эту вот угрозу, на мой взгляд. А как это будет развиваться стратегически? Вот Федор Войтоловский показал колоссальные цифры торгового оборота между Соединенными Штатами и Китаем. Вот что значит эта цифра почти 700 миллиардов долларов? Это так немного абстрактно. Это экономика Швейцарии. Вот Швейцария, размер швейцарской экономики вот такой, как торговый оборот между этими двумя экономическими гигантами. Обращаясь к студентам, я что хочу сказать. Вот, судя по вашим вопросам, понимаете, у вас есть некое такое ощущение, что вы очень сильно зависимы от больших игроков вокруг вас. Отчасти это правильно, но мой месседж к вам: занимайтесь своей страной. У вас есть конкурентные преимущества, у вас прекрасный университет. Делайте экспорт образовательных услуг в регионе. Оставайтесь в Армении, не уезжайте. Работайте ради своей страны. Вот это мое вам пожелание.
Спасибо большое, коллеги. Я сначала хотел бы выразить благодарность сегодняшним панелистам и академику Дынкину за действительно очень интересную панель, за очень продуктивную дискуссию. Вот это именно тот диалог на высшем экспертном уровне, которого мы ожидали в Ереване и который нам удалось совместно организовать. Поэтому большая благодарность Институту мировой экономики, международных отношений и лично профессорам Дынкину и Войтоловскому. Это первое. Второе, я хотел бы, конечно, сказать, что мы в Армении, в этом университете сумели создать экспертное сообщество высокого уровня. И я тоже очень рад, что наше студенчество 2 дня, особенно сегодня в субботу, с таким интересом следит за нашей конференцией. И, конечно же, я повторюсь вслед за Александром Александровичем в том, что нам нужно создавать свою сильную страну, и нам нужно ощутить вот это преимущество глобальной нации. Без сильной страны глобальной нации у нас не получится. Поэтому, конечно, это не только месседж сегодняшнего дня, это месседж нашего университета в мир. Мы действительно готовим людей высокой профессиональной готовности и высокой гражданской ответственности. И, конечно же, как университет, который привлекает, одна из редких институций в сегодняшней Армении, которая работает на импорт людей, а не на экспорт людей. Это для нас очень важно, и, конечно, присутствие ведущих мировых экспертов из ведущих центров, аналитических центров глобальной политики, я думаю, что создаст еще большую мотивацию для наших молодых исследователей заниматься этой проблематикой мирового развития. И мы уже начали диалог с ММО на тему о том, чтобы создать магистратуру по глобальной политике, в которой мы будем в том числе пользоваться и их выдающимися исследователями, учеными, а также и теми связями, которые у ММО наработаны за все эти годы. И, конечно, опять же, возвращаясь к личности Примакова, хотелось бы сказать, что мы в университете очень рады тому, что примаковские чтения осуществились, они стали реальностью. С моей точки зрения, они прошли очень интересно, на очень высоком профессиональном экспертном уровне, и это еще раз дань уважения к нашему великому предшественнику. И одна коррекция, вот 2 дня подряд в этой аудитории звучал Казахстан в качестве государства, которое, значит, тюркоориентированное. Мне кажется, что одним из итогов нашей конференции будет являться то, что мы совместно с профессором Асатряном инициируем проведение армяно-тюркской конференции с участием ведущих казахских, значит, не только казахстанских, но и мы и Киргизию привлечем региональные страны, Туркмению привлечем. Это совершенно другая история, ребята. Это совершенно, понимаете, один возглас и один комментарий президента Назарбаева в сторону поддержки Алиева не означает, что Казахстан страна, которая тюркоориентирована или двигается в этом направлении. Совершенно не так. Казахстан – это дружественное Армении государство, совершенно дружественное. Я хочу вам напомнить о присутствии того же президента Назарбаева вместе с президентом Ельциным в Карабахе с целью содействия регулированию карабахского вопроса. Вот это, наверное, такой существенный ауткам, который нам послышался от нашей аудитории, и мы, конечно же, приглашаем Институт мировой экономики и международных отношений присоединиться к нам, потому что мне кажется, что есть и прекрасная тема, связанная, значит, со взаимоотношениями России с этим же миром, да, и мы скорее всего, синициируем на следующий год проведение такой крупной региональной конференции в Ереване. Еще раз хочу выразить огромную благодарность всем участникам, всем панелистам, спикерам и нашим, конечно, коллегам и студентам, которые 2 дня внимали нашим умным, а иногда, может быть, заумным речам. Спасибо вам большое, всего вам доброго. Спасибо. Я приглашаю всех панелистов этих 2 дней на коллективную фотографию.
Уважаемые коллеги, просим сдать наушники для синхронного перевода при выходе из зала. Спасибо.